Tozer was one of the most scholarly and eloquent preachers of the 20th century. The interesting thing about him, to me, is that he was a scholarly type, like Jonathan Edwards, like some of my favorite Christian writers, St. Augustine, C.S. Lewis, just to give two men 14 centuries apart. And if you read any of his books, he does come across in a very scholarly way. That is, unlike Billy Sunday or Dwight Moody or a lot of popular evangelists of our day, he does not use a primarily emotional appeal, but an appeal to thought. And you would think that this would be a very educated man, as men like Augustine and Lewis, not to mention the great writer of epistles from the Bible, St. Paul, all were. But if you look at Meet the Author, it said he went to a one-room schoolhouse, and it says nothing about him going to college. How did he become so eloquent, so good in his use of language, to know so much? Well, he did something that people often did in the past. He educated himself. He did what a lot of the great writers of the past, like John Milton, William Wordsworth, Jane Austen, people who grew up with books, who grew up with parents who loved learning and had a big library. He just read a great deal. He enjoyed doing it. And no doubt he read the Bible a lot, as it also says, accepted the Bible as the supreme authority, and thus applied biblical ideas to all the things he had written. As for Tozer's books, although The Pursuit of God is the first one mentioned in our textbook and is also the one I ran into the most when searching for images, The Knowledge of the Holy is the one that I have read by Tozer, in fact owned, and it certainly showed what an impactful writer Tozer is. The thing about Tozer is that he's reminding us our relationship with God is the most important thing. It's not following the rules as the Pharisees, whom he'll say a lot about in his essay, did. It's not the praying, the observing of fasts and feasts, the giving of alms. It's that we do it out of love. The knowledge of the holy begins with one of the really great lines I've read outside of the Bible about our relationship with God. It says, how we look at God is the most important thing in our lives. And that's true even of atheists or of people who say they're agnostics, because the absence of real trust or belief in God forms everything in their earthly lives and, of course, their eternal lives as well. And so does it for Christians. Even if we truly believe in and are reaching out for the biblical God, how we see him, what attributes of his we focus on the most in thinking about him, affect everything else. I know that's true in my life. Think about how you consider God the most. What aspect of his is most important to you? The rest of the book, if you look at the contents page of The Knowledge of the Holy, is different attributes of God. Tozer focusing on each of them in different parts of the book. It's a great list of attributes. He does a great job of illustrating them. In fact, I've used them in my praise prayers, kind of different ones each day. And for me, that book does show what a good writer and a good Christian thinker A.W. Tozer is. I don't know whether this essay was part of a book or something larger, or whether it was a short essay written for a magazine or a conference or what, but it certainly makes a valuable point, and it makes it clearly, and we will go through the text. The test by which all conduct must finally be judged is motive. As water cannot rise higher than its source, so the moral quality in an act can never be higher than the motive that inspires it. For this reason, no act that arises from an evil motive can be good, even though some good may appear to come out of it. Every deed done out of anger or spite, for instance, will be found at last to have been done for the enemy and against the kingdom of God. Unfortunately, the nature of religious activity is such that much of it can be carried on for reasons that are not good, such as anger, jealousy, ambition, vanity, and avarice. All such activity is essentially evil and will be counted as such at the judgment. In this matter of motive, as in so many other things, the Pharisees afford us clear examples. They remain the world's most dismal religious failures, not because of doctrinal error, nor because they were careless or lukewarm, nor because they were outwardly persons of dissolute life. Their whole trouble lay in the quality of their religious motives. They prayed, but they prayed to be heard of men, and thus their motive ruined their prayers and rendered them not only useless, but actually evil. They gave generously to the service of the temple, but they sometimes did it to escape their duty toward their parents, and this was an evil. They judged sin and stood against it when they found it in others, but this they did from self-righteousness and hardness of heart. So with almost everything they did. Their activities had about them an outward appearance of holiness, and those same activities, if carried on out of pure motives, would have been good and praiseworthy. The whole weakness of the Pharisees lay in the quality of their motives. That this is not a small matter may be gathered from the fact that those orthodox and proper religionists went on in their blindness till they at last crucified the Lord of glory, with no inkling of the gravity of their crime. Religious acts done out of low motives are twice evil, evil in themselves and evil because they are done in the name of God. This is equivalent to sinning in the name of the sinless one, lying in the name of the one who cannot lie, and hating in the name of the one whose nature is love. Christians, and especially very active ones, should take time out frequently to search their souls to be sure of their motives. Many a solo is sung to show off. Many a sermon is preached as an exhibition of talent. Many a church is founded as a slap at some other church. Even missionary activity may become competitive, and soul-winning may degenerate into a sort of brush salesman project to satisfy the flesh. Do not forget the Pharisees were great missionaries and would compass sea and land to make a convert. A good way to avoid the snare of empty religious activity is to appear before God every once in a while with their Bibles open to the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. This passage, though rated one of the most beautiful in the Bible, is also one of the severest to be found in sacred writ. The apostle takes the highest religious service and consigns it to futility unless it is motivated by love. Lacking love, prophets, teachers, orators, philanthropists, and martyrs are sent away without reward. To sum it up, we may say simply that in the sight of God we are judged not so much by what we do as by our reasons for doing it. Not what, but why, will be the important question when we Christians appear at the judgment seat to give account of the deeds done in the body. So let's briefly analyze this short essay before we finish with A.W. Tozer. He does a good job of starting right off with his thesis. The test by which all conduct must finally be judged is motive. He states what he believes and what he's trying to argue right at the outset, and he puts it in other words in the conclusion, and that's often also a good idea. Restate your point in the conclusion in different words. Not what, but why will be the important question. That's the heart of what he's saying. It doesn't matter what we actually do. It matters whether we did it out of love or whether we did it for the wrong and sinful reasons that he details in the third paragraph: anger, jealousy, ambition, vanity, avarice, which means greed. He makes a couple of good points. He says that these things done for ostensibly religious reasons are worse than things done out of normal pride, jealousy, greed, all the sins of secular life. And he's saying that the nature of religious activity, and he uses the Pharisees as his prime example, is such that it can be carried out for those low motives. Unfortunately, I've seen that since I became a Christian. Perhaps you have too. People who truly believe that they love God, and maybe do underneath, but are fulfilling some sinful desires, some self-centeredness perhaps. There are other possibilities. believing that they are doing God's will for them and following God. He says 3 paragraphs later, religious acts done out of low motives are twice evil. Causing children or causing people, I think, innocent in their relationship with God, not to trust in God, not to believe in Him, because of wickedness that people do who call themselves Christians. I think it's true that that might be the worst sin, to cause other people not to believe in God because you say, I'm a Christian, but behave in a way that makes those people think, well, if that's a Christian, that I don't believe in that God. That's happened many, many times in the world. And what Tozer describes it as is sinning in the name of the sinless one, and other similar well-balanced phrases. The final point he makes is about 1 Corinthians 13. Of course, an extremely popular, and it should be, passage in the Bible, a beautiful passage, but as he says, it's so beautiful that we sometimes forget how firmly and strongly St. Paul is making his point. It's a passage often used in weddings or about marriage, and it should be. A lot of the things it says, for example, love keeps no record of wrongs, are very good advice in a marriage relationship. However, as we've seen in discussing A Midsummer Night's Dream, love doesn't just mean eros, love between a man and a woman. Love at the highest level is God's love for us and our love for Him. And what Paul says is it doesn't matter what we do. We could give away everything. We could be martyrs. But if it's not done for loving motives, Tozer's basic point, then God will judge it as trash. God will judge it as nothing. What matters, as Tozer says, is the reason we do things. That's stated elsewhere in the Bible in a somewhat different context as man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. And I think the depth to which Tozer writes, even in this short essay, shows why he is still considered such a great Christian writer.